And he said, and this is the sentence, this is the one that lives in me. He said, "Don't do this here." Not "what are you talking about?" Not "what did she do?" Don't do this here. You understand? Those are the words of a man who knows exactly what this is. There is no other reason for that sentence to exist. Something in my chest just sat down, right there on the steps. Then Vanessa came out behind him, dish towel, drying her hands. And she saw my face, and she stopped in the doorway and stopped drying. She said, "Well, can this wait until my parents leave?" And I said, No, Vanessa. There's a quitclaim deed recorded March 21st transferring my house to a company you formed in February with my last name on it. And there's $191,000 drawn against it. And there's a notary stamp on that deed belonging to a girl named Bethany Ochoa, who has never met me. Ron laughed at something inside the house. That's the detail I can't get rid of. Her father laughing in the kitchen at something on the TV. Vanessa didn't flinch. That's what got me. I don't know what I'd expected. Panic. Something. She said very calmly, "I was protecting the house." I said, "From who?" She said, "You're 64, Walt. You've got no trust, no plan. Will's from the 90s. One bad diagnosis and Medicaid takes that house, and Danny gets nothing. I moved it into a holding company. That's what estate planning is. You'd have thanked me. In 5 years you would have thanked me, and you know it." And I said, "Vanessa, if that were true, you'd have asked me. It takes 4 minutes to ask. You've had 7 years of Sundays to ask." She said, "You'd have said no." And there it was. Right there on a porch, in July. Not a denial. A grievance. She wasn't sorry. She was annoyed. Annoyed that I'd found it early. Annoyed at the paperwork. Annoyed the way you're annoyed at a flat tire. I said, "You drew $191,000, Vanessa. That's not protection. Protection doesn't have a withdrawal schedule." Nothing. I said, "Where'd it go?" Nothing. I said, "Did it go to the barn?" And her eyes moved. That's all. Just moved. And I said the last thing I had. Bethany Ochoa's journal is blank for March 19th. Her stamp is on my deed and her journal is blank. That's not planning, Vanessa. That's a felony with a witness. And her face went still. I've told this part to a few people, and I always get it wrong, so let me try harder. It wasn't shock. It wasn't guilt. It was the exact stillness my own hands had in that parking garage on Ontario Street. The stillness of a person who's just been told the number and is doing the arithmetic. She wasn't horrified. She was calculating. I watched a woman I'd bought a Christmas present for run the math on her own sentencing exposure in real time, on her porch, with a dish towel in her hand. Then Danny said, "That's not what happened." And I looked at my son and I said the only true thing I had left. "Danny, 2 signatures, mine and your mother's. Yours isn't on it. You want to explain to me how you're not on a document that gives your family's house to your wife's company." He opened his mouth. He didn't have anything. 6 weeks later, I found out why. He'd known since April. Not March, April. She told him after it was recorded, after the money moved, and he had 6 weeks with that in his chest, and he came to my draft party and sat in my chair. He didn't do it. I want to be fair to my son. He did not do it. He just decided not to tell me. Every day. For 6 weeks. Which is a different thing, and I've spent a year deciding whether it's better. I turned around. I walked to the truck. And I called Priya before I started the engine, and she picked up on a Saturday, and all I said was, "Go." Let me ask you something before I tell you how it ended. If it were your kid standing in that doorway, arms out, wife behind him, her parents laughing in the kitchen, do you go through him? Do you say it in front of everybody? Or do you walk to the truck? I still don't know if I got it right. Tell me what you'd have done. I read these. It ended in offices. It always does. Nobody yells, "Objection." Nobody gives a speech. It's just paper for months. The house. Quiet title action. Unopposed by the end. Vanessa's own criminal attorney told her to stop fighting the civil side because everything she said in it could be used against her. The court voided the quitclaim deed as a forged instrument. A forged deed transfers nothing. It's not a bad deed. It's not a deed at all. Legally, it never existed. Kaminsky Family Holdings LLC was dissolved. The house went back to how it was, which is to say it went back to never having left. That took until October. The bank. Sentinel Ridge fought. Of course they fought. $240,000 line, 191 drawn, and they wanted somebody to eat it. Their argument was that they were an innocent lender who relied on a recorded deed in good faith. Priya's answer, roughly, a notarization that never happened is not good faith. It's a failure of diligence. And their own underwriter accepted a 2-month-old LLC with no operating history, borrowing against a paid-off primary residence occupied by 2 people who weren't members of the LLC. She used the phrase, should have called the house. They should have called the house. 1 phone call to the address on the deed, and none of this happens. They settled. The mortgage was released against my property. They went after Vanessa personally and against what was left of Vesper Hall, and I genuinely do not care how that went. The criminal case, Cuyahoga County. She was originally charged with forgery, identity fraud, tampering with records, and telecommunications fraud. The tampering count is the one that carries weight in Ohio, and the Notary Journal is what built it. She pled. They almost always plead. 1 count of forgery, 1 count of identity fraud. 6 months in the county jail, 5 years community control, restitution, legal fees, the Ellis pendants costs, the forensic accountant. Everything. A little over $206,000, which she will be paying for the rest of her natural life, and which I will likely never see most of. Notary commission revoked permanently. Title and escrow license gone permanently, statewide. She will never work a closing table again in the state of Ohio. Meridian Title fired her 11 days after Priya's subpoena landed. They also, and I want to say this because it's the only institution in this story that behaved well, changed their entire stamp policy. Every notary at every branch now has a locked personal drawer. Bethany Ochoa still works there. She got a promotion in January. Priya sent her flowers. I sent her a card that took me 4 drafts and said almost nothing. Vesper Hall, foreclosed in November. The barn's still standing out there off 42. I drove past it once in December, which I'm not proud of, and there's a realtor's sign in the field, and the string lights are still up. $14,000 a month. Forged my house for a barn that closed anyway. He was never charged. There wasn't a case. He didn't sign anything, didn't form anything, didn't touch the money. Priya says a prosecutor wouldn't have gotten out of the parking lot with it. He moved out in September. They're separated. Divorce is grinding along. It's complicated because they're both attached to a foreclosed barn and about $400,000 in debt. And that's a knot that takes years. He lives in a rental in Fairview Park now, 40 minutes from us. He calls every Sunday, sometimes Wednesday too. I want to tell you it's fixed. It's not fixed. Here's what it actually is. I asked him once, in October, in my garage, why? Why 6 weeks? Why the draft party? And he said, because I knew what would happen when I told you, and every day I didn't tell you was a day it hadn't happened yet. I understood that. That's the terrible part. I understood it completely, because that's exactly why I waited 2 days to tell Margot. He's my son. He's got my cowardice. He got it from somewhere and it wasn't from her. He came to Thanksgiving. Margot didn't ask him, she just set a plate, which is Margot's way of issuing a summons. He sat next to me instead of across from me. He's sat across from me at that table since he was in a booster seat, and he sat next to me instead, and neither of us said anything about it. Margot cried in the pantry for about 90 seconds, and came out and served the potatoes. I'm not supposed to know that. Roy told me. Roy tells me everything eventually. Priya said something at our last meeting that I've held on to. I asked her, straight out, do families come back from this? And she said, some do. The ones who do, it's never because somebody apologised well. It's because somebody kept showing up on a Sunday for about 4 years. 4 years. That's the number she gave me. We're 11 months in. It's Sunday evening as I'm telling you this. Late July. A year and change from that porch. Margot's in the kitchen having an argument with a recipe. Out loud. The recipe is losing, but it's not going quietly. Roy's on my back steps with the Torino's carburetor in a coffee can of solvent. That carburetor has been in that can since June. He's not fixing it. He's never fixing it. It's a reason to sit on my steps, and we both know it, and neither of us has ever said it out loud in 24 years, and we never will. Margot yells through the window that dinner's 20 minutes, and if Roy leaves that can on her steps again, she's putting it in his truck. Roy yells back that he'd like to see her try, and then quietly, to me, says, "She'd do it." Danny's coming at 6. He's bringing a pie. He can't make a pie. He'll bring a store pie and put it on a real plate, and we'll all pretend. And that's fine, that's what family is. It's a bunch of people agreeing to pretend about a pie. The lantern's still on the mantel. The 1940s ad lake from The Man in Sandusky. Margot asked me once if I wanted her to get rid of it. I said no. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. And it's the only thing I actually know now that I didn't know before. It's not that Vanessa was fake, that'd be easy. If she'd been fake, I'd have caught her. I catch things. That's my whole life. She meant the lantern. She researched it for weeks and she meant it. And 4 weeks after Christmas, she opened a company with my name on it. Both true. Same person. Same year. People aren't one thing. I spent 33 years around steel. And steel is one thing. Steel is exactly what it says it is. Steel fails and there's a crack, and you find the crack. People don't crack. People just decide. One small ordinary Thursday at 6:52 p.m. in an empty office. And then they go home and set the table. Check on your parents' paperwork. Not because you think somebody's coming, because if it's clean and locked and somebody's watching it, nobody can. A trust and one phone call to a title company would have ended this before it started. That's it. That's the whole lesson from a year of my life. Sun's going down over the garage. Roy's not fixing anything. Margot's yelling at a recipe. Some evenings don't need filling. My son put both arms across his own doorway and told me I wasn't coming in. Not shouting. That's the part people always get wrong when I tell it. There was no shouting. He said it the way you'd tell a delivery driver he had the wrong address. Polite. A little embarrassed. Both arms out. One hand on the frame. One hand on the door. His wedding ring catching the porch light. "Dad, you're not going in there while her family's here." I looked at him for what felt like a long time and was probably 4 seconds. 36 years old. My son. Wearing a shirt I bought him. Standing in a doorway I helped him move a couch through. Guarding a table I had been invited to sit at. Protecting a woman who had signed my name on a legal document and handed my house to a bank. I didn't argue. I didn't push past him. I turned around, walked down those 3 concrete steps I'd watched him fall off when he was 7, got in my truck and called my attorney before I put the key in the ignition. My name is Walter Kaminsky. Everybody calls me Walt. I'm 64 years old, I live in Lakewood, Ohio, and for 33 years I inspected signal systems for the railroad. You want to know what that job actually is? It's this. 2 trains are moving toward each other on steel that doesn't care about either one of them. My job was to make sure they never met. That's it. That's the whole career. I spent 3 decades checking things that looked fine, because looks fine is what a derailment looks like right up until it isn't. I retired 2 years ago. Pension, a paid-off house on Wexford Road, and a garage full of tools I use for approximately nothing. 33 years of assuming nothing is fine, until I've checked it myself. And I never once check my own family. Before I get into it, I'm curious where you're listening from. Drop the town. Not the country, the town. I like the small ones. Let me back up, because if I just tell you the ending, it sounds like a court case. It wasn't a court case. It was a family, and then it wasn't. Margot and I have been married 40 years this coming spring. Marguerite on her licence. Margot to everyone alive. We got married in November in a church basement in Parma because the church itself was booked, and it snowed 6 inches. And my father-in-law spent the reception apologising to people for the basement, like he'd personally chosen it out of spite. Margot worked 29 years in hospital billing at Fairview. Eventually she ran the department. You want to know what kind of person she is? She once found a 14-cent error in a hospital's quarterly reconciliation and would not let it go for 6 days. 6 days, 14 cents. Her boss told her to drop it. She found it. It was a keystroke from a temp in 2011. I tell you that because it matters later. Margot does not miss things. Margot has never missed a thing in her life. And she missed this one. Same as me. And I don't think she's forgiven herself yet. We have 1 kid. Daniel. Danny. 36. Danny was an easy child and a hard teenager, and then an easy adult, which is the order you wanted in. He sells commercial HVAC systems, which sounds boring and pays better than anything I ever did. He's good at it because he's likeable in a way I'm not. People trust him inside of 10 minutes. I've watched it happen. It's a gift, and I've always thought it was a little bit of a liability, And I'd like the record to show I thought that long before any of this. Danny married Vanessa 7 years ago. Then there's Roy Petrosian, 24 years now. We met because our kids were on the same terrible baseball team, and we were the only two fathers who didn't yell at the umpire. Roy drove a bus for the RTA for 31 years and retired with a back that clicks. He's been restoring a 1971 Ford Torino since 2009. It does not run. It has never run. If it ever ran, Roy would have a genuine crisis. Roy shows up at my house without calling. Always has. Margot pretends this bothers her. That was our life. Sunday dinner most weeks. Margot's tomatoes taking over the side yard every August like an occupation. Roy in the garage. Danny calling on Sundays. Then every other Sunday. Then when he could. Which I told myself was just what happens when a man gets married. I told myself a lot of things. That's basically this whole story. Vanessa Croft. 34. Works in title and escrow. Closings, deeds. The paperwork side of buying a house. She was at a company called Meridian Title downtown for 5 years, and she was good at it. Genuinely good. Employee of the Year twice, which they gave out in the form of a plaque and a gift card. And she hung the plaque up, which told me something I didn't know how to read at the time. Here's the thing I need you to understand, and it's the part people find hardest to believe. I liked her. I'm not building to a reveal where I say I always had a bad feeling. I didn't. I liked Vanessa. She was funny in a dry way that took me a year to catch. She asked me actual questions about the railroad and then remembered the answers, which almost nobody does, because the railroad is boring to everyone, except the people who did it. She knew Margot takes her coffee black, but her tea with milk, which is a distinction Margot's own sister has never gotten right. At Christmas she got me a signal lantern. A real one. 1940s. Adlake kerosene, from a collector in Sandusky. She had to have researched that for weeks. It's on my mantle right now, today, and I have not moved it, and I couldn't tell you exactly why. What I did not know for about the first 5 years was that she and Danny had put everything they had, and then a lot they didn't, into a wedding and events venue out in Medina County called Vesper Hall. Old dairy barn. Reclaimed everything. String lights. You've seen the type on Instagram. They bought it in 2019. You know what happened in 2020? To a business that exists exclusively so that 150 people can stand in a room together. They should have walked away in 2021. They didn't. They doubled down because Danny is a salesman, and salesmen believe the next quarter fixes the last one. And because Vanessa had put her name on it, and her name is the thing she does not let go of. By last year it was bleeding around 14,000 a month. 14. A month. I learned that number from a forensic accountant. Not from my son. None of the warning signs were warnings. That's what I want to get across. Every single one of them was fine. January. Danny asked me at dinner, out of nowhere, whether Mom and I had ever done anything with the house. Estate-wise. I said we've got wills from 1998 from a guy in Rocky River who's dead now. He said, "You should really look at a trust, Dad. Probate in Ohio is a nightmare." I said, "Sure, someday." That's a good son asking a good question. That's what that is. Any of you would have said the same thing. February. Vanessa asked if she could pull our property card off the county site for something at work. Said she was training a new hire and wanted a real example that wasn't a client's. Wexford Road. Paid off in 2016. Nice clean file. I said, "Knock yourself out. It's public record. Anyone can pull it." I gave her permission to look at my house on a county website. I want you to sit with how small that is. March. A woman called the landline asking to confirm an appointment for a signing. I told her she had the wrong Kaminsky. There are a lot of us in this county. She apologised and hung up. That's it. That was my one shot. 30 seconds on a Tuesday afternoon, and I hung up the phone and went back to the garage. April. The mail got weird. Not gone. Weird. A statement here or there, Margot mentioned it twice. I blamed the post office, which Roy took personally, and we had a whole thing about it, and I remember laughing. Also April. I went out to Vesper Hall to drop off a compressor Danny wanted to borrow. Nobody answered the front, so I walked around back, and Vanessa was sitting on the loading dock with her phone against her ear and her free hand over her eyes. I heard maybe 8 seconds of it. She said, "I just need Tilfall. I've got it handled. Nobody's taking it." Then she saw me and her whole face reset, just like that, like a light switch, and she said, "Walt, you want coffee? There's coffee." And I thought, and I mean this exactly, poor kid. I felt sorry for her. I drove home thinking about whether Margot and I could quietly float them 10 grand without making Danny feel like a failure. I actually brought it up that night. Margot said, "Let's wait until they ask." I know now what "till fall" meant. I know exactly whose name that plan was built on. I didn't hear a confession that day. I heard a young woman having a hard time, and I've turned that 8 seconds over so many times since that I've worn the edges off it. Here's how it actually came apart, and it wasn't dramatic at all. May 14th, homeowners insurance renewal. Our agent is a guy named Terence Ollie, who's had our policy since 2004, and calls every renewal instead of emailing because he's 68, and doesn't care what year it is. He's going through it, roof, coverage limits, the usual. Then he goes quiet for a second, and he says, "Walt, quick thing, who's Sentinel Ridge Lending?" I said, "I've never heard that name in my life." He said, "They're listed as mortgagee on the policy. Somebody added a lender to your file in March." I said, "Terry, the house is paid off. Paid it off in 16. We had a party. You were at the party." There was a pause, and Terry, who is not a dramatic man, said, "Walt, I want you to pull your deed. Today, not tomorrow." I want to tell you my hands shook. They didn't. 33 years on the railroad, I've been the guy who found the crack, and I'll tell you what actually happens. You go quiet. You get very, very organised. Something in your chest steps back about 6 feet and starts taking notes. I drove down to the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Office on Ontario Street and pulled my own property record like a stranger. There it was, a quitclaim deed recorded March 21st, transferring 100% interest in the property at Wexford Road from Walter J. Kaminsky and Marguerite A. Kaminsky to an Ohio limited liability company called Kaminsky Family Holdings, LLC. I had never heard of that company. It was formed in February. Registered agent, Vanessa Croft. Sole managing member, Vanessa Croft. She'd used my last name in the company name. That's what got me. Not the theft. The branding. 2 signatures on the deed. Mine and Margot's. Mine was close, real close. She clearly practiced. But the K was wrong. I looped the bottom of the K. Always have. I've signed my name maybe 400,000 times on inspection sheets, and that loop is muscle memory from 1983. Margot's wasn't close at all. Margot's was a joke. Somebody had traced it off a Christmas card. And underneath, a notary block. Stamp, commission number, everything. Notary, Bethany Ochoa. I'd never met a Bethany Ochoa. I'd never been in a room with a Bethany Ochoa. According to that document, Bethany Ochoa had personally watched me sign my house away on March 19th and had confirmed she knew who I was. Then I asked the clerk to run everything else recorded against the parcel since March. There was a second document, open-end mortgage, home equity line of credit, filed March 30th by Sentinel Ridge Lending, against the property, in the name of Kaminsky Family Holdings, LLC. Line amount, $240,000. Drawn to date, as of that morning, $191,000. She hadn't been planning to take my house. She'd already taken it, 6 weeks earlier, and spent most of it. I sat in the truck in that garage on Ontario for a long time. 40 minutes maybe. I didn't cry and I didn't punch the wheel. I read the recording date over and over, like it was going to change. And here's the thought that came. And it wasn't about money at all. It went, she needed my signature on this in March. Danny was at my house for the Browns draft party in April. He sat in my chair, he ate my food, he asked me how the Torino was coming. He knew, or he didn't. And I couldn't tell you which one I wanted, and I still can't. I called Roy from the parking garage because I couldn't call Margot yet. He picked up on the second ring. He always picks up on the second ring. I don't know what he's doing on the first. I said, "Roy, Vanessa stole my house." Silence then. "Say that slower." So I told him. The deed, the LLC with my name on it, the notary I'd never met. The 191 grand. He didn't say anything for a while. And then he said the thing I've thought about more than anything anybody said in this entire year. He said, "Walt, where was Danny in March?" I said, "I don't know." And Roy said, "Yeah, that's the one that's going to cost you, not the money, not." Then he said, "You home in 20 minutes? Don't answer. I'm coming over." He came over. He didn't bring beer, which is how I knew he understood. He sat in my garage with me for 3 hours, and we talked about the Torino's carburetor for 2.5 of them, and it was the only kindness anybody could have done me that day. Roy's not a smart man in the way that impresses people. He's the smartest man I know about the only thing that matters, which is when to shut up. I waited 2 days. That was wrong. I know it was wrong. I told myself I was protecting her, and I was actually just a coward for 48 hours. And I've apologised for it since, and she's accepted the apology in the way she accepts things, which is completely, and also she remembers. Thursday night, kitchen table. I put the county printouts down in front of her, face up. Margot put her reading glasses on. She read the whole thing. All of it. The deed, the LLC filing, the mortgage. Took her maybe 6 minutes, and she didn't make a sound. Then she took the glasses off and set them on the table, and she said, "That's not my signature." She didn't even try on mine. I said no. And Margot said, and her voice didn't go up, it went down, which, if you know her, is so much worse. $240,000 against a house we ate rice for. Then she was quiet for maybe a full minute. And then she said, "She bought you a lantern." I said, "Yeah." "She researched a lantern for you. She found a man in Sandusky." Margot was looking at the tablecloth. "She did that in December. And in February she opened a company with our name on it." She got up. She rinsed a mug that was already clean. And with her back to me, she said, "Walt, does my son know?" And I said, "I don't know, Margot." She stood at that sink for a long time. Then she said, "Okay, get a lawyer. Get a good one. Get one who doesn't like these people." That's my wife. 40 years. 9 minutes from a forged deed to a strategy. Terry, the insurance guy, gave me a name. Priya Raghavan. Real estate and fraud litigation. Downtown, 49 years old, has a laugh you hear maybe twice in an hour, and it comes out of nowhere. And it's genuinely startling. She read the file in front of me, didn't say a word for 11 minutes, then she squared the papers up and said, "Okay, Mr. Kaminsky, I need to say something before anything else, and I need you to actually hear it. You're going to keep your house. Say it back to me." I said, "What?" She said, "Say it back." I said, "I'm going to keep my house." She said, "Right. Now that that's out of the way, we can think, because you can't think while you're scared." I've been in rooms with a lot of professionals in my life. Nobody has ever done that for me before. Then she went to work. She pointed at the notary block first. This is the whole case, not the signature. Signatures are arguable. Handwriting analysis is soft. A defense attorney plays games with it. But the notarization is a sworn act with a paper trail. Every notary in Ohio keeps a journal. Every one. If Bethany Ochoa's journal doesn't have you in it on March 19th, this document is dead. And whoever put her stamp on it committed a felony that isn't about your family at all. It's about the state. Then she said the thing that changed everything. "Walt, I want you to hope Bethany Ochoa is real." I said, "Why in God's name would I hope that?" She said, "Because if she's real, she's either a co-conspirator or she's a victim. And if she's a victim, she is the best witness you will ever have, and she doesn't love anybody in your family." Here's what Priya laid out, and she laid out every step of it before she took a dime. 1. Emergency filing in common pleas. An action to quiet title, plus a Ellis pendens recorded against the parcel. That's a public notice that says this property is in litigation. Nobody can sell it, borrow on it, or touch it. She filed it in 6 days. From that moment, the house couldn't move another inch. 2. Notify Sentinel Ridge Lending, in writing that the mortgage was procured by fraud and that the borrower was a company created by forgery. This is the part people get wrong. You have to fight the lender, not just the person. That lender wired out $191,000 in good faith. They will absolutely come after the house unless you make it their problem. Priya's letter made it their problem in about 4 paragraphs. 3. Subpoena Meridian title. Not for the deed, for the access logs. Who pulled the property card in February? Who printed the deed template? Whose login touched the file? Vanessa was an escrow officer with credentials. 4. Find Bethany Ochoa and get her journal. 5. Referral to the Ohio Secretary of State's office over the Notary Commission, and a package to the County Prosecutor's Economic Crimes Unit. But only when the paper was airtight. Priya said something I've repeated 100 times since. Prosecutors do not want your feelings, they want a binder. We are building a binder. And then she said, "Now, the hard part." I said, "What's the hard part?" She said, "For the next several weeks, you are going to be extremely boring. You will not call your son. You will not call Vanessa. If they call you, you talk about the weather. If you confront them now, evidence disappears and I lose the case for you. Do you understand?" I said, "How long?" She said, 7 weeks, maybe 8. 7 weeks of knowing. I'll be honest with you. Those 7 weeks were worse than the day I found out. The day you find out, you've got adrenaline. There's a task. You're driving somewhere. You're pulling documents. Your body's got something to do. 7 weeks of nothing is different. 7 weeks of your son texting you a photo of a Torino part he found at a swap meet, and you have to text back a thumbs up. I stopped sleeping around week 2. Not dramatically. I'd just be up at 3:40 sitting in the kitchen, in the dark. Margot would come out around 4 and not say anything, and put the kettle on, and we'd sit there. Some nights we didn't talk at all. That's 40 years. You can sit in the dark with somebody at 4 in the morning and it counts as a conversation. Danny called twice in that stretch. I did the weather, I did the Guardian's bullpen. I did it so well he didn't notice a thing, and I hung up the second call and sat there thinking, I just lied to my son for 9 minutes and he couldn't tell. And then thinking, is that where he gets it? Roy came by 4 times a week and worked on that car in my garage. Never mentioned it once. He'd just show up around 6 with a socket set and stay till 9. I found out in November from his wife that he'd stopped going to his Tuesday card game for 2 months. He never told me. Never would have. Margot did a thing I still don't entirely understand. She kept cooking Sunday dinner. Full dinner. And I said, "Margot, they're not coming. We know they're not coming." She said, "I'm not doing it for them." Week 5, Priya called. She'd found Bethany Ochoa. Bethany Ochoa was 26 years old, and she was a real notary with a real commission, and she worked at the same branch of Meridian Title as Vanessa Croft. She had also never met me in her life. Here's what happened, and it's so stupid and so ordinary, it makes me want to put my head through a wall. At title companies, notary stamps sit in desk drawers. Some of them sit in a shared drawer. Everybody knows this. Everybody's fine with it. It's a busy office, closings stack up. Somebody needs a stamp. You grab a stamp. The journal, the log you're legally required to keep, is a spiral notebook that lives next to the stamp. Vanessa took the stamp, used it, put it back, did not write in the journal because writing in the journal would have created a record. And that's the whole thing. That's the gap. She was so careful about the deed template and the LLC and the lender and the mailing address, and she got by a spiral notebook that was clean on a day it shouldn't have been. Priya deposed Bethany. I read the transcript. There's a moment in there I'll never forget. Priya asks her, "Did you notarize a quitclaim deed for Walter Kaminsky on March 19th? And Bethany says no. And Priya says, "Are you certain?" And Bethany says, and this is the exact quote, "I've never met him. I'd remember. Nobody signs away a paid-off house at 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday and you forget it." 26 years old. Better instincts than me. She cried in the deposition. Not because she was in trouble, because her commission was her whole thing. She'd studied for it. She'd paid for it herself. She was proud of it. And somebody she ate lunch with had used it like a stapler. Meridian's access logs came back the same week. Vanessa's credentials had pulled the Wexford Road property card in February, the training example. Downloaded the county's blank quitclaim template on March 6th. Printed it at 6:52 p.m. on a Thursday when the office was empty. Schoskunk. Priya called me and said, "Walt, we're done. It's a binder." I said, "So I can talk to my son." And there was a pause on the line, and Priya said, "Walt, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that he already knows." 3rd Saturday in July. Danny and Vanessa were having people over. Her parents were in from Erie for the weekend. Ron and Deb, who I've eaten Thanksgiving with. Nice people. Ron's a retired lineman. We get along. I did not go there to make a scene. I need that on the record, and I need you to believe it, because everybody assumes I went over there to blow it up. I went early, deliberately early, 90 minutes before dinner. I went because whatever was about to happen to my son's life, I wanted to be the one who told him, not a process server, not a detective, not his wife with her version already loaded. Me in a driveway, man to man. That's all I wanted. I pulled up and he came out on the porch before I was out of the truck. And I knew right then, he came out fast. You don't come out that fast unless you've been watching the window. His face. God, I've known that face since it was purple, and screaming in a hospital on Detroit Avenue. Jaw tight, eyes going everywhere except me. He got to the top of the steps and he put both arms out. One hand on the frame, one on the door. Dad, you're not going in there while her family's here. I said, Danny, I need 10 minutes in the driveway, not inside. The driveway. He said, not today. I said, do you know what she did?